From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Good morning and welcome to The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan here in Beijing. As megacities grow and evolve, one of the most pressing challenges for urban governance is how to respond to citizens' concerns quickly and effectively, 24/7. Here in Beijing, the revamped 12345 public complaint hotline, launched in 2019, has become a game changer. Today we'll dive deep into how this innovative system works and how it could perhaps inform the rest of the world. Take a look.
This is a platform that never sleeps. Operating 24 hours for a week, 365 days a year, the Beijing 12345 citizen hotline handles tens of thousands of calls daily. Whether it's submitting a simple document or seeking advice on major policy decisions, this hotline connects people with solutions and guidance. The Beijing 12345 hotline began in 1987 as the mayor's hotline, with just one phone line and 3 operators. In 2019, the city launched a swift response to public complaints reform. Today, over 60 different hotlines have been consolidated into one, the 12345 hotline. The center now operates 750 workstations and employs 1,700 operators. How does it work? Citizens can submit their requests through multiple channels: phone, website, WeChat, Weibo, and more. All calls are answered within 15 seconds. The hotline service agency records the details and creates a work order. Operations will categorize the requests into different types, such as inquiries, assistance, complaints, suggestions, etc., and pass them on to the appropriate local authorities within their jurisdiction to handle the issue. For inquiries, the information is available in database. Operations will respond directly. For different cases, a 4-tier urgency system is applied. Emergencies are handled within 2 hours, while general matters are addressed within 15 days. The hotline closely monitors and provides follow-up feedback, revisiting citizens to assess their satisfaction. Over the past 6 years, the hotline has handled more than 150 million cases. Resolution rates have increased from 53% to about 97%, while satisfaction rates have risen from 65% to around 97%. The hotline is also highly accessible to foreign residents and visitors, offering services in 8 languages. Whether it's finding directions or checking park hours, the 12345 hotline ensures no one is left behind.
Once our operator receives a call from the foreigners, and we will transfer the call to our English operators just like me, and we can answer the phone and resolve his problem. Maybe they are lost in Beijing. They are called us to ask for directions. Of course, they have something like public service problems, like water shortage or power outage. In this year till now, we have already received about 403 phone calls.
The Beijing 12345 hotline is not just a service. It's a dynamic lifeline that reflects the city's commitment to a people-centered approach. It ensures the voices of the city's 21 million residents are heard and their concerns are addressed.
That's my colleague Xia Lu. Thank you so much for the report. Now joining us today to unpack all of this are 3 amazing experts. First, we have Weiping, Professor of Urban Planning at Columbia University. Also with us live from Beijing, Andy Mok, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. And in the studio, we're thrilled to have Professor Xia Lu, Research Fellow at the National Academy of Development and Strategies at Renmin University. Professor Xia, let me start with you. This is perhaps a novelty for our foreign friends, our expat friends, but we've known this. This has been around, the hotline has been around for 6 years. And facts speak loud. An astonishing 150 million requests have been handled since this public complaint hotline has been in place, with resolution rates shooting up from just 50% to a whopping 97%. Beyond these numbers, what does this transformation tell us about the evolving public service in Beijing?
Well, I think there are three keywords could illustrate the transformation. The first transformation is that the public service or the local government, different department, they have become more and more responsive to the local people's request. That's the first thing. Previously, you still can call, you still can dial the hotline, but the few kind of cases would be handled in a very kind of a quick way. That's the first thing, responsive, become more and more responsive. The second is that the different departments in the local government, they have become more and more cooperative and coordinated. Like you can just dial 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and those kind of operator can forward your call to a particular or specific, let's say, department to handle the issue. So they become more and more cooperative. So you don't have to remember, different kind of hotline like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 0, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 5, this kind of thing. That's the thing. And last but not least, the transformation also lies in the public opinion. People can become more and more active. They know that they could participate by dialing the call or just making the phone to improve the public service, because all this kind of public service could be improved through the, let's say, communication or the interaction. So I think the this responsive and cooperative and active, the three keywords, could illustrate the transformation of the public service in Beijing.
Yeah, very good. This hotline, also known as the public complaint hotline, which is also known as the mayor's hotline, right? In Chinese, we say this is the mayor's hotline, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very easy to remember. And actually, I myself dialed in a number of times, and some complaints have been resolved. Andy, let me turn to you. You've been living in China for quite a while. What are your observations regarding this hotline and the impact that it has brought to the citizens and residents here?
Well, Wang Guan, I've been living in China for a long time. I've been living in Beijing for almost 20 years. So speaking from personal experience, I can see the enormous advances in urban governance that have been made. And a key part of that is this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hotline. And I think it's important to point out a couple things here. First of all, it is a new form of government accountability. So in the West, people tend to lionize or really idolize elections as a way to ensure accountability and governance. But we see with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it is that it's a very practical, real-time way. So in many ways, it's a much better solution to ensure government accountability. The second point I would make is that as a former technology investor, it makes me think a lot of something called CRM software, or customer relationship management software, where you track information about your customers, but also you make sure that you can share that information throughout an organization. So one of the biggest problems for companies and for governments is siloed information. So one department knows something, the other department doesn't. And I think this is another very powerful feature of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that like the best customer relationship management software applications, it allows the government to see more completely, to have a 360-degree view of what citizens want and what they're concerned about. And the last thing I would say, again, coming from a technology background, is this makes me think of open source software, where software is developed by many, many people working together. And there's a saying in the open software world that with enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. And what this means is that if there's only a small group of people working on something and they encounter a problem, it can be very hard to solve. But when you have lots and lots of people with many, many different perspectives, all looking at a problem, the solution sometimes becomes very, very clear. So to me, this is really a very, very powerful application of governance technology that embodies the Chinese spirit, the Chinese approach of not really caring too much about ideology and these sometimes empty concepts like quote unquote democracy, etc., but really focusing on practical results and things that people care about.
Great. Professor Wu, how would you compare and contrast this Beijing Mayor's Hotline that is aimed at resolving people's complaints, and they have, well, to a large extent, successfully been doing so over the past 6 years? We know that global cities such as New York or London have similar mechanisms. How would you compare the Chinese system, and particularly the system here in Beijing, with that of the rest of the world?
Yes, so I'm actually really impressed in a book that I edited called China Urbanizing. We actually believe that the use of digital technology in improving urban governance, Chinese cities are far ahead of many cities around the world. And in fact, we call it provincializing the West. So on this point, New York City, for instance, has a 311 system, which is actually quite similar. And the kind of calls we get in New York are somewhat more specialized, limited to city services. The Beijing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 really was amazing yesterday when I was there visiting to see the wide range of information that is being received, handled, and responded to. And also the important part of feedback loop was also quite timely. On the other hand, I think one thing that's very different between Beijing and New York is New York makes all of the data that are collected through these calls and the service responses open to everybody, researchers and residents and so on, so through an open API mechanism. And that actually helps the city understand how different parts of the city, how people live in different parts of the city actually participate in the 311 system. But I think in Beijing, that's done primarily internally. That could open up to allow more different sets of eyes and perspectives to help the city better serve people, especially what we will call in internet desert areas that are having a hard time approaching the hotline. So, but overall, it is an incredible innovation in urban governance here.
Yeah, thanks for your insight, Professor Wu. Professor Xia, what do you think regarding this hotline? I mean, there's some lower-hanging fruits, right? If you are trying to resolve such an issue as you had a fight with your neighbor, you want the police to intervene, or you have a broken window, or the neighbors are too loud, you have the district chief to resolve that ASAP, right? But what if people dialed in and they want a new district boss? They said, I don't like this company's CEO, or I don't like my boss, or I don't like this, I don't like that. That can be much more deeply ingrained issues, institutional issues. How can this hotline work to ensure fairness? I mean, addressing not just those what perceived to be easier issues, but issues that are more complex and sensitive.
Well, that's a very good question. Actually, in preparing for this interview, I have read a lot of these empirical studies on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hotlines. One of the sociologists has been doing this kind of participatory observation to different kind of local call centers, and he observed that most of the calls, I mean, more than 50% of the calls are actually from the elder people. Those elders, they don't really have the particular issues. For example, they don't have the real, let's say, the noisy thing. They don't even have this kind of the parking thing. They don't even have those kind of the lack of the electricity equipment. They just want the voice be heard. They just want to express their, something like their better, a description of the society. Something they are not complaining. They are not complaining particular issue. They are complaining this kind of, what they have now and what they have perceived, the distance, the disparity between the reality and their perceived. So that requires the operator to need some kind of, in my opinion, I term this as emotional capability. There is
empathize with the viewer,
exactly.
the questioner.
Exactly. The operator might not solve the problem on the spot right away. However, they could serve as a way or as a kind of a channel for those kind of elder people, particularly the elder people, to express their aspiration, express their ideas, so that they could feel not that lonely. They could feel that they be concerned, they be observed, and their voice being heard. Well, that matters more than particular issue being solved. So in my opinion, those kind of local community workers or local community, let's say, social workers, they should be kind of empowered this kind of capability of the emotional capability, so that they could be more responsible than the local issue or, particular issue being solved.
Yeah, China is fastly turning into a a society that is getting pretty old. I wouldn't say very old, but as we're having, our median age increasing year by year. It is important to hear, the concerns of the elderly and hear them out. Andy, let me borrow your technology background and ask you this. What technological tools, management systems, in your opinion, have been effectively employed through this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 system to achieve what it has achieved today? Because we're talking about a megacity of Beijing with a population of over 21 million. They're handling what? 150 million requests in the past 6 years.
Sure, Wang Guan. So I think, a couple of important technologies here. Obviously, computers, software, and again, I think about it a lot like a customer relationship management system, and that when someone calls in, you have to create a ticket, a case. It needs to be routed to the right person or the right department. There also needs to be a management layer to make sure that standards are being followed, whether these are practical standards like are problems being resolved on a timely basis, to what we just heard, the importance of empathy. And I can't emphasize this, that one of the greatest values of a system like this is it lets people feel heard. And many times humans, to use a very American expression, need the opportunity to vent, to express their frustration, even though some things, maybe just cannot be solved, but just to feel heard is incredibly important. So I think these are some of the technologies. We look at artificial intelligence. I think it has an incredibly valuable role to play in making the system more responsive in different ways. So, we can talk about perhaps blockchain as well in terms of creating a record, an immutable, unchangeable record for how process requests are moved through the system, et cetera. So I think from a technological perspective, this is fascinating. What I also want to say, too, is that we can understand this at a micro level where it solves individual problems. But from a broader systemic technological perspective, this is an enormously valuable set of real-time data where the city government can see if it's not just one person maybe unhappy with traffic in a certain part of the city or perhaps with other kinds of services, but that these patterns can emerge. And of course, this goes right to the heart of big data, which is, we can consider another kind of technology that China has shown its vision and its competence, not just in envisioning how to apply big data techniques, but then to actually execute it on a day-to-day basis. And again, you mentioned, millions and millions of requests. I mean, this is an enormous undertaking to make sure that the whole machine functions. So I think there's a fascinating set of complementary technologies at work here at Wang Guan.
Yeah, exactly. Professor Wu, any thoughts now that you've heard from our Chinese professors, and then also Andy, who's been living in China for 20 years? Again, comparing this Chinese system versus the system in the United States. We know this, right to your congressman system in the United States that is also a feedback loop. Exactly. How would you compare?
Yeah, I actually do very much agree that in the fact that how local governments are responsive to citizenry can be measured in many different ways, right? Voting, writing, and this kind of participation all matter. I do feel, though, the Beijing system perhaps is quite ambitious in the sense of trying to respond to all of the different calls, because at some point, triaging, just as we do in hospitals and emergency rooms, where really urgent matters that can be handled effectively through such a system might need to be prioritized. So some other types of inquiries, as much as we want to help people, city and local governments have limited resources. And under these kinds of resource constraints, to solve a problem such as water, sewage, blockage, probably is more in the expertise area of city agencies. And that's why I think New York's 311 system focuses on municipal and public utility services. So at some point, I think there will be coming a saturation point where a triaging system will probably be needed for fielding different types of calls.
Yeah, triaging. Thank you for this, comparison and these tips, I would say. Let's see what would happen going forward. Professor Xia, talking about these specific complaints, it's also about our friends from overseas, right? China is opening its borders once again. It's fastly re-emerging from what happened in the previous years, visa-free policies to dozens of countries in Western Europe and around the world. A lot more foreigners are in Beijing, where we live, in the CBD area, visibly. How can the 12345 hotline better serve the expat and the foreign community?
Well, actually, this is also one of the kind of place that the 12345 hotline could be improved in the future. First of all, the operators, the operators kind of language level should be improved. According to my, let's say, reading, previous studies, empirical studies on this kind of 12345 hotline, not only in Beijing, but also in other 349 cities, well, most of the operators, they do not have this kind of a college level degree. They might be some kind of a high school student or even the professional high school student, but they lack this kind of educational level or even this kind of a multilingual level. So that's the first thing. The other point is that the 12345 hotline operators, they are working for the government, but they are not directly working for the government agency or department. They may know
the contractors.
Exact contract outsourcing contractor. Yeah. They may know what should they do politely, how should they respond to the kind of the citizens or resident, but they don't really know the exact mechanism of one policy or one structure or even one, let's say, issue being solved, or maybe they just know toward which department this phone should be transferred or kind of connected, but they don't really know how to solve the problem. And the foreigners also, foreign residents also, they kind of they lack some kind of basic information or basic knowledge about the background of how the Beijing city or how cities in China is managed or is run or is kind of operated. So that's we call information gap. So how to, let's say, lower or how to, let's say, make the information gap become shorter and shorter. That would be the next stage kind of challenge. And in my opinion, if this kind of issue could be solved in the future, well, it may smooth or it may getting, let's say, it may get this operator or this kind of hotline better and better to serve the foreign residents kind of requirement or the request.
Andy, what do you think? How are these systems serving the foreign residents? Do you think perhaps a multilingual AI system can come into play in the future? The conversational AI system that is, resembling the Doubao of China, that can address foreigners' needs.
Sure, well, I think there are many ways to do this. I mean, sort of AI chatbots that are multilingual certainly is one approach. And others, and this is a very important specialized area, which is call center management, right? So if you can route a certain language, someone speaks Spanish, someone speaks English, they speak German, you make sure they get routed efficiently to the right person, is another way to solve that. But what I want to also mention is this also reflects, I think, a very profound difference in philosophy. So we heard in New York City with 311, it's more limited, and partly it is due to resources, but partly it's due to philosophy as well. I think what the Chinese approach has been based on traditional values and practical experience is that government can be a benevolent force that serves everybody in a very, very wide variety of ways. So not just fixing the streets, not just dealing with complaints from neighbors, but again, having people feel connected, whether that's an older person living alone or whether it's a younger person. I think the Chinese worldview is that a government can be a powerful, benevolent force, whereas I think the U.S. tends to be skeptical and suspicious of government, perhaps for good reasons. But that this is providing an alternative vision for how urban governance can work. And again, it's not just expressing an ideal or a vision, but I think what the Beijing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 system shows is this can actually work at enormous scale. As you mentioned, Beijing is what, 20, 21 million people, one of the largest cities in the world. And the fact that this system can operate at such scale, I think is quite an achievement.
Exactly, Andy. I agree with you in that you need to understand the social fabrics and the cultural context of China, of the Chinese, to understand what's going on here. Let's look forward, Professor Wu, to talk about the 2024 Beijing Forum on Swift Response to Public Complaints, which you're participating, which I'm participating as well, starting very soon. What are your expectations for this forum? What issues should take center stage in your opinion?
Yes, so tomorrow, I think, and the day after, I think people from around the world, practitioners, scholars, I think when we use technology, when we use big data into urban governance, there are a number of issues, right? First of all, when we have technology, are we still using the same logic in terms of determining which areas, which issues get priority? Are we using new logic? Second is increasingly as information is recorded and people's names and so on are recorded, how are we protecting privacy and data security? And third, I think it's really more useful for governance and more effective governance is how can we take advantage of the big data to really understand, for instance, in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even though we have very high response rate, are problems actually being solved? We're looking at, because the level of citizen participation will eventually depend on whether the problems are actually solved. And some problems take more than 7 days to solve. But I think with this forum, there will be different experiences and practices to be exchanged to see what's the best way or reasonable ways and effective ways to understand what are the sort of the pain points of such systems and what are the true advantages of such systems.
Great. We do look forward to it. Professor Xia, what do you think? What do you anticipate to be the issues coming up at this Beijing Forum on a swift response to public complaints?
Yes, actually, I expect that there will be more discussion on the new kind of cutting-edge technologies, let's say contribution, influence on the improvement of the hotline. But in my opinion, of course, I myself embrace new technology. I myself embrace the AI, artificial intelligence. I use a lot of artificial intelligence to help me to improve my work. However, I think the people-to-people communication, particularly the emotional, this kind of participation could not be replaced by artificial intelligence, no matter how how intelligent this artificial intelligence are or will become. People-to-people communication should not be replaced. So in my opinion, there should be people, or the center should be people in this kind of problem solution or the public participation or even the city governance in the future.
All right, well, that's all the time we have here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to our guests for sharing their insights, and thank you to all of you, wherever you are, for tuning in to The Hub on CGTN. Keep an eye on our news coverage and join us again soon. I'm Wang Guan. See you next time on The Hub.